The FBI says this is all connected to a violent drug trafficking organization.
Across multiple states, federal teams hit their marks at the same coordinated minute. Stairwells flooded with agents, apartments flipped from quiet to controlled chaos. Garages and small offices transformed into arrest scenes in seconds. What had looked ordinary just hours earlier became evidence sites under bright tactical lights. Handcuffs locked, evidence bags filled. Cash, narcotics, and weapons were laid out methodically across bare floors. There were no warning shots, no public spectacle, only precise entries and controlled force. This was not a random bust. It was a synchronized strike targeting a structure far larger than the addresses on the warrants. What surfaced in those early hours was only the outer layer of a system that had embedded itself inside routine business activity and trusted neighborhoods. And what followed suggested that the operation stretched far beyond a single city. One of the key moments unfolded on a wide Texas highway, a corridor where refrigerated trucks pass every hour without drawing attention. In steady daylight, one trailer rolled past like any other. Clean exterior, valid plates, documentation aligned perfectly with the declared load. Fresh produce headed north for distribution. Nothing about it triggered immediate alarm. Troopers initiated what appeared to be a standard inspection. Vehicles were positioned with discipline. The driver was guided to the shoulder, engines idled. Traffic continued moving. To anyone passing by, it was another routine roadside stop, the kind that happens thousands of times each year. But routine stops are often where deeper systems unravel. The driver remained cooperative, hands visible, posture controlled. Officers moved deliberately around the trailer, maintaining calm spacing and measured communication. Then a K9 unit was deployed. The dog began a slow, systematic sweep, nose tracing metal seams, door edges, undercarriage lines. It paused near the rear axle, sat, held position, a trained alert, precise, controlled, unmistakable. Officers exchanged brief looks, no raised voices, no hesitation. Even though nothing appeared suspicious to the naked eye, the alert required escalation. The trailer doors were opened. Crates of vegetables were inspected. Clean packaging, cold air from the refrigeration unit. No visible contraband. But scent does not lie. Portable scanning equipment was brought in and moved methodically along the trailer floor and sidewalls. The readings revealed subtle density irregularities beneath the cargo area. Not random variation, but structural inconsistency. Something had been engineered under the load. Pallets were removed carefully to preserve the declared shipment. Sections of the metal flooring were exposed. Tools were applied with steady pressure. Steel scraped against steel beneath the hum of passing traffic. Then the compartment appeared. A hidden cavity, precisely fabricated and sealed to withstand routine inspections. Inside were tightly wrapped packages stacked with exact spacing, uniform in size, identical in preparation. This was not improvised concealment. It was industrial-level design built for repetition. Field tests confirmed the substance. High-purity methamphetamine, processed and packaged for long-distance distribution, not small-scale street sales. The quantity was measured in dozens of kilograms. Its placement beneath legitimate produce shipments demonstrated calculated logistical planning. This was not the work of a reckless courier acting alone. The compartment's construction, the scale of the load, and the sophistication of concealment pointed toward organized transport infrastructure, a system designed to move product repeatedly across state lines without detection. The scene was secured. The driver was placed under arrest with controlled professionalism. He showed visible fear, not defiance. His responses suggested confusion more than command, indicating limited awareness of what had been engineered beneath the trailer floor. But the structure behind the load was far more informed, and the Texas stop was only one thread in a wider operation already unfolding. The driver's reaction confirmed something critical. Seasoned traffickers often rehearse their responses long before the stop ever happens. They know how to breathe evenly, how to maintain eye contact, how to answer without revealing tension. What officers encountered in Texas did not match that profile. The paperwork was immaculate, the concealment was advanced, but the man behind the wheel did not display the confidence of someone managing a high-level shipment. That contrast exposed a deeper fracture. The truck was not the story. It was the first visible crack in a system that had been moving undetected along major highways for months, possibly years. Within hours, data from the stop was secured and transmitted to federal agencies. Routing history, maintenance logs, GPS tracking records, fuel patterns, digital dispatch timestamps. Every layer of operational metadata was preserved. Analysts began cross-referencing the truck's movement against existing intelligence on interstate trafficking corridors and flagged freight anomalies. The connections formed quickly. This vehicle was not operating alone. It belonged to a broader fleet registered under a recognized corporate identity. What began as a routine roadside inspection transitioned into the opening phase of a multi-layered federal investigation. The company named in the shipping records was Southwest Logistics, a long-established freight carrier with a clean regulatory profile and national reach. On the surface, it represented stability. Hundreds of drivers, active contracts with major retail, distribution networks, refrigerated trailers transporting produce, packaged goods, and temperature-sensitive freight across state lines daily. Compliance records were intact. Safety ratings reflected years of standard commercial operation. On paper, it was a model participant in the American supply chain. That is precisely why investigators moved carefully. Dismantling a legitimate corporation requires evidence, not suspicion. Federal teams initiated structured audits. Fleet telematics were reviewed. Maintenance schedules were examined line by line. Financial flows were analyzed for irregularities. The discrepancies aligned with the Texas stop. Certain trucks within the fleet showed abnormal service intervals, modifications that were not reflected in repair documentation. Select vehicles repeatedly traveled corridors consistent with narcotics distribution networks rather than traditional retail demand cycles. This was not random inconsistency, it was pattern behavior. Further, investigation revealed a more severe conclusion. Southwest Logistics had not been infiltrated by external criminals. It had been architected from within to serve cartel interests. The company was not compromised. It was purpose-built. Its legitimate operations provided continuous movement, commercial credibility, and reduced inspection frequency. Illegal shipments were embedded alongside lawful cargo, shielded by contracts with major retailers that guaranteed constant traffic and minimal scrutiny. Trust had been weaponized. The fleet itself was compartmentalized. Most trucks operated legitimately, maintaining the company's regulatory profile and revenue stream. A smaller subset, designated internally as priority vehicles, handled high-risk transport. These units received specialized modifications at controlled facilities. Hydraulic flooring systems, reinforced substructures, concealed cavities engineered to evade standard inspection tools. The craftsmanship was precise, integrated seamlessly into trailer architecture. Climate systems were calibrated to preserve dual cargo. Fresh produce above, narcotics below, ensuring both survived long-haul transit. This was not short-term improvisation. It reflected capital investment, technical expertise, and long-range planning. Driver roles were equally segmented. Many operators had no knowledge of hidden compartments beneath their loads. They transported what they believed to be legitimate freight. Others, however, received coded instructions, route deviations, timing adjustments, specific refueling points, accompanied by elevated compensation. Communication protocols avoided explicit references. No direct language. No written acknowledgement of illicit cargo. Movement was coordinated through timing and geography rather than description. The result was a mobile distribution network capable of moving methamphetamine nationwide while appearing to deliver groceries and household goods. Major American. Highways became logistical arteries for a concealed operation. The commercial food supply chain, without awareness, functioned as structural cover. The Texas stop reframed everything. It was not about the drugs seized that day. It was about exposure of method, engineering, paperwork, route synchronization, corporate shielding, all functioning as a unified system. Investigators understood the implication immediately. For every shipment intercepted, multiple others had already passed. The concealment method showed adaptability and confidence, characteristics that develop only through repeated success. The objective shifted. The target was no longer individual drivers. It was the architecture of the enterprise itself. Federal strategy transitioned toward structural dismantling, mapping route density, identifying modified trailers, isolating maintenance facilities, decoding internal communication rhythms. Surveillance expanded quietly. No premature raids, no public escalation. Every mile driven by a priority truck added resolution to the intelligence picture. Every fuel receipt, toll record, and dispatch timestamp tightened the framework. The Texas traffic stop remained the anchor point. It provided physical proof. Narcotics, engineered concealment, falsified maintenance records that connected paperwork, mechanical design, and distribution corridors into one coordinated structure. What began as a routine inspection had exposed an operational spine stretching far beyond a single highway shoulder. That moment in Texas marked a line. Routine enforcement had just uncovered industrial-level crime. One truck on one highway forced a larger question into focus. How many similar shipments had already crossed state lines undetected? How deeply had this system embedded itself inside trusted commercial networks before the first crack appeared? As investigators pushed forward, attention shifted away from the roadside shoulder and toward the corporate structure. That made concealment scalable. The highway stop was proof of concept. The company was the engine. Federal tracking expanded quietly. No immediate raids, no visible escalation. Agents turned their focus to screens instead of doors, watching live telemetry as fleet markers moved across digital maps stretching from Texas through the Midwest and toward the East Coast. Each truck transmitted location data every few seconds. Individually, those signals meant little. Layered together, they exposed rhythm. Most vehicles followed predictable commercial patterns. Distribution centers, fuel stations, rest intervals, delivery windows aligned with retail demand. The cadence was consistent, but a subset moved differently. Unscheduled pauses, route adjustments outside dispatch logs, timing irregularities that did not match standard freight behavior. These deviations allowed investigators to separate routine commerce from deliberate transport. As the data set expanded, drivers were categorized by movement profile, communication behavior, and field observations. The majority operated normally. No unexplained detours, no abnormal contacts, standard interaction with dispatch. These drivers moved freight without knowledge of what had been engineered beneath the trailer floor. A smaller group followed another pattern entirely. Routes shifted with minimal notice. Stops appeared at locations absent from delivery plans. Communication occurred through indirect channels, coded timing instructions instead of explicit directives. Financial records showed supplemental payments beyond base compensation. These drivers followed silent rules. Avoid questions, avoid inspection curiosity during loading, maintain schedule discipline. The investigation then moved up the chain. Movement patterns consistently pointed back to fixed physical locations. GPS overlays revealed repeated visits to maintenance yards and secondary garages not listed in official corporate documentation. Surveillance teams positioned quietly near these facilities. Trucks entered appearing empty. They exited riding lower on suspension, handling altered by unseen weight or structural additions. Inside those garages, mechanics worked with custom fabricated components, hydraulic flooring systems, reinforced cavities, concealment architecture designed to evade detection, not perform legitimate repair. These were not service shops. They were production sites for smuggling infrastructure. In parallel, financial analysts traced capital flows through layered accounts tied directly to corporate leadership. Maintenance expenditures exceeded normal fleet standards. Equipment purchases did not align with legal hauling needs. Invoices reflected specialized fabrication rather than routine upkeep. Board-level approvals corresponded with shipment schedules. Executive decisions synchronized with highway movement. The structure became clear. Legal and illegal operations ran through the same command chain. This was not fragmentation. It was integration. A single enterprise operating on two tracks, one visible, one concealed. Once the operational map was complete, the strategy shifted. Observation ended. Preparation began. Timing became the decisive variable. Move too early and leadership would disperse. Evidence scattered across state lines. Move too late and additional shipments would clear distribution hubs. The solution required synchronized action. Planning rooms filled with route diagrams, communication matrices, arrest schedules, and facility layouts. Federal agencies aligned roles with precision. Every team received exact timing windows to prevent leaks or premature exposure. The chosen moment came before dawn. Highways were active enough to intercept moving priority trucks. Offices and secondary facilities were minimally staffed. The balance created operational leverage. At the signal, units across multiple states moved simultaneously. On major corridors, marked and unmarked vehicles. Boxed-in priority trailers enforced controlled stops. Drivers were removed quickly, secured, and separated from phones and onboard communication devices before any warning could travel upstream. Inspection teams immediately accessed the trailers. Flooring was opened roadside. Concealed compartments were exposed in full view of flashing lights and moving traffic. At corporate headquarters, entry teams breached doors and secured hallways before internal communication chains could activate. Executives were detained at desks. Servers, laptops, encrypted drives, and mobile devices were seized intact. Simultaneously, at identified garages, specialized equipment was confiscated. Hydraulic systems mid-installation, fabricated panels awaiting placement, custom tools engineered for concealment work. The organization that had relied on synchronization and compartmentalization was now facing the same strategy turned against it. Every level was hit at once, and the system that once moved quietly through trusted commercial lanes was now fully exposed under coordinated federal control. Mechanics were taken into custody with tools still warm in their hands. Workbenches remained scattered with custom panels and hydraulic components. Partially modified trailers stood open under bright industrial lights, concealment systems exposed mid-installation. The speed of the operation prevented coordination. Phones were seized before calls could be placed. Servers were secured before remote deletions could begin. Each node of the network was isolated from the others. This was not a pursuit. It was a closing net. As the hours unfolded, the scale of the takedown became measurable in numbers that reflected years of hidden movement across the country. Approximately 52 tons of methamphetamine were secured, staged for distribution or already in mid-transport. 250 trucks were seized, including specialized modified trailers and standard fleet vehicles used to preserve the company's legitimate profile. 273 individuals were arrested, spanning executives, logistics coordinators, mechanics, and drivers who knowingly participated. These figures represented operational capacity, not a single disrupted load. To grasp the impact, agents compared the seized volume against street-level distribution metrics. The methamphetamine recovered equated to millions of individual doses, enough to saturate major urban regions for extended periods. Each truck functioned as a mobile storage unit, capable of crossing multiple state lines under the shield of commercial legitimacy. Removing 250 trucks from circulation did not simply interrupt a route. It dismantled a transportation backbone. The organization did not lose a shipment. It lost functionality. Simultaneous arrests were equally decisive. Leadership could not issue counter-orders. Mechanics could not fabricate new compartments. Priority drivers could not reroute cargo. The compartmentalized structure that once ensured resilience now faced coordinated paralysis. Communication channels went silent as encrypted devices were confiscated and associated accounts frozen. A network that had operated fluidly across highways was reduced to cataloged evidence stored in secured federal facilities. This level of disruption required precision. Excess force was unnecessary. The structure collapsed because every tier was removed at once. Just as critical was the differentiation inside the arrest process. Investigators rapidly distinguished between knowing participants and drivers who had simply followed assigned routes without awareness of hidden compartments beneath their cargo floors. While hundreds were detained during the sweep, data analysis quickly isolated individuals whose movement logs, financial records, and communication histories showed no coded behavior or irregular compensation. Those drivers were released after verification. Priority operators and supervisors faced formal charges. This distinction reinforced the objective: dismantle organized crime without indiscriminate consequence. The focus remained structural, not symbolic. When the numbers were consolidated, the outcome was unmistakable. 52 tons of methamphetamine represented years of procurement, engineering, coordination, and capital investment removed in a single synchronized action. 250 trucks represented the logistical spine of the enterprise, now impounded and stripped of operational value. 273 arrests eliminated every layer of authority, from executive planning to roadside execution. Strategic command, mechanical infrastructure, transport execution, all neutralized within the same operational window. The circle that began with silent digital tracking ended in simultaneous physical control. Yet even as the immediate phase concluded, a broader question emerged. Would the system remain permanently broken, or would attempts be made to reconstruct it? Under new identities? Not every roadside encounter that morning ended in guilt. On multiple highways and loading zones, drivers stood beside their vehicles as agents scanned floors, checked documentation, and opened sealed compartments with practiced efficiency. Some watched in visible shock as hidden cavities were exposed beneath cargo they believed to be legitimate. Their expressions reflected fear, not calculation. These moments mattered. They drew a clear line between orchestrated criminal enterprise and ordinary labor caught within a compromised structure. The operation did not treat every driver as an adversary. That operational restraint shaped the legal aftermath. Questioning occurred in controlled roadside command tents and later inside secured facilities. Digital records were reviewed in depth: phone metadata, route telemetry, dispatch logs, payment histories. Each data stream was compared against the movement architecture already mapped during surveillance. For many drivers, the patterns were clean. No coded instructions, no unexplained detours, No irregular bonuses. Work histories showed consistent routes and standard compensation aligned with lawful freight operations. Their movement reflected participation in a commercial supply chain, not deliberate involvement in concealed narcotics transport. That separation preserved investigative integrity, and it reinforced the central conclusion. This was not chaos hidden in commerce. It was commerce engineered for concealment and then systematically dismantled. Those drivers were released after verification, sometimes within hours, sometimes after extended review, but always with documented clearance. Licenses were returned, personal items handed back, paperwork restored. Agents explained what had been engineered beneath their trailers. Relief was visible, but it was mixed with anger and disbelief. Men and women who had trusted their employer now understood they had been used as shields for a cartel-controlled logistics operation. They had crossed state lines unaware they were driving above concealed narcotics compartments. That distinction remained central to the entire case. Federal teams made a deliberate decision to protect workers who were never intended to be part of the crime. The focus stayed fixed on organized leadership, technical engineers, and drivers who knowingly accepted illegal roles. Priority operators were isolated based on route deviations, coded communication patterns, and unexplained compensation. Mechanics who fabricated hidden compartments were detained at work sites, surrounded by altered trailers and specialized tools. Executives were taken from offices where budgets had been approved and maintenance authorizations signed. The message was consistent. This was a strike against cartel control, not against American labor. By drawing that line publicly and in court filings, agencies reinforced trust in the process. The operation targeted systems that exploited legitimacy, not the workforce that depended on lawful employment. With the innocent separated from the guilty, attention shifted entirely toward structural prosecution. Prosecutors moved to treat the company as a criminal enterprise rather than a collection of isolated offenders. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act became the primary legal instrument, allowing the organization to be charged as a unified body. Boardroom decisions were legally connected to narcotics movement on interstate highways. Court proceedings advanced quickly once indictments were filed. Evidence demonstrated how legitimate freight revenue subsidized illegal transport infrastructure. Maintenance budgets tied directly to concealed compartment fabrication were presented in detail. Internal approvals aligned precisely with shipment timelines. The company's clean regulatory image was not viewed as a defense. It was treated as an aggravating factor. Sentences reflected the scale of the harm. Senior leadership received life terms, permanently removing them from the industry. The punishment matched the breach of public trust. Asset seizures followed with equal intensity. Trucks were confiscated. Garages were shuttered. Corporate accounts were frozen. Logos were stripped from vehicles before auction. Properties transferred under federal control. Southwest Logistics did not dissolve quietly through bankruptcy. It was erased, its name removed from contracts and regulatory registries nationwide. The fleet that once moved unnoticed across American highways disappeared as though it had never existed. When the operation closed, two realities remained. Workers misled by the system were cleared and released. Those who built and directed the system were removed permanently. With the cartel-linked structure dismantled and its commercial cover destroyed, the focus now turns to prevention, ensuring that similar enterprises cannot embed themselves inside legitimate supply chains again. What began as a single traffic stop on a Texas highway ultimately closed a far larger chapter in a conflict that rarely appears dramatic on the surface. One truck, one hidden compartment, one alert from a trained canine. From that roadside moment, investigators traced paperwork, routing anomalies, financial approvals, and mechanical modifications until the full shape of a cartel-controlled logistics empire came into view. What collapsed was not just a shipment. It was a structure that had blended crime into everyday commerce for years. Modern drug conflicts no longer resemble street gunfights or high-speed urban chases. There were no public shootouts, no dramatic pursuits broadcast live. The confrontation unfolded through freight schedules, maintenance logs, dispatch timestamps, and synchronized highway movement. Trucks became transport platforms for concealment. Warehouses became staging nodes. Contracts became protective camouflage. The battlefield was not a neighborhood intersection. It was the supply chain that feeds and stocks the nation every day. This case demonstrates how power can hide behind legitimacy, clean inspection records, lawful cargo, recognized corporate branding. Trust was not bypassed, it was exploited. And that reality introduces a harder truth. Disrupting one enterprise does not eliminate the methods that allowed it to function. Those methods still exist within the modern economy. At the same time, the operation demonstrated that patient, coordinated enforcement can dismantle systems that appear untouchable. The response was not loud. It was precise. Leadership, infrastructure, and logistics were targeted simultaneously, eliminating the ability to adapt or reassemble. A sprawling network was reduced to static evidence. If you want to continue following these silent battles, where highways replace front lines and paperwork replaces weapons, subscribe to Stay Tone, stay engaged, and share your perspective. Below. Operations like this rarely dominate headlines, yet they shape the security of daily life. Do coordinated strikes like this restore long-term stability, or do they simply expose deeper systems still waiting to be uncovered?